While the hero doesn't always come out on top in movies, it's generally made abundantly clear when the bad guy wins, right? Well, every so often, movies get a little bit more sly and subtle about the villain's victory, perhaps because they don't want to downplay the hero's successes or make the movie a pure downer. I'm Ewan, this is Whatculture, and here at movie villains you didn't realize actually won. Robert Callahan, Big Hero 6. Big Hero 6's villain is a masked man known as Yokai, later revealed to be Professor Robert Callahan, played by the always brilliant James Cromwell, who faked his death as part of a revenge plot against tech magnate Alistair Cray, Alan Tudyk. And though Callahan is ultimately arrested at the end of the movie, he straight up accomplished everything that he set out to do. He obliterated Cray's HQ by reactivating the teleportation portal, and most importantly, he got his daughter Abigail back, who disappeared while working as a test pilot on one of Cray's portal experiments. All in all, a few years in jail for executing his plan as intended is probably a pretty acceptable trade-off for Callahan, especially as he rescued his beloved daughter. It's just a shame that the plan inadvertently led to the death of protagonist hero's older brother Tadashi, which Callahan at least expresses regret for. Freddy Krueger, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Though it's fair to say that Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger just loves to torment young folk through their dreams, his wider operating goal since the start of the series has been to kill off the children of the parents who banded together and killed him in revenge for murdering 20 local children all those years ago. And in A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, Freddy finally follows through with his quest, killing the so-called last of the Elm Street children, Kristen Parker, who was burned to death midway through the movie. Kristen herself even hammers the point home by telling Freddy moments before her demise that she is the last. And while the series of course continued on for many more installments, for the franchise's midway point, Freddy had effectively accomplished his main mission. The rest of the souls he claims after that point are just gravy, basically, and no matter how many times he's defeated in the subsequent movies, nobody can take away from him the fact that he killed all of the original Elm Street children. President Snow, The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. Granted, there aren't many movie villains who get ripped apart by an angry mob and can still genuinely lay claim to coming out on top, but The Hunger Games President Snow, Donald Sutherland, is no ordinary villain. Though Snow is murdered by a rabble of irate citizens in Mockingjay Part 2, this comes at the end of a long, successful, and enriched life. He got to live many, many decades as the autocratic ruler of Panem, and through Katniss's actions, not only avoids an official, formal execution, he also gets to see his nemesis, President Coin, get murdered by her before he dies. Even accepting Snow's own brutal death, he literally goes out laughing, knowing that he managed to talk Katniss into killing his enemy, robbing her of the power she so desperately craved before he himself was finished off. It may be a Pyrrhic victory for Snow, but it's a victory nonetheless. Terrence Fletcher, Whiplash. Whiplash seemingly ends with jazz drummer Andrew Nyman, played by a career best Miles Teller, triumphing over his abusive former instructor Terrence Fletcher, J.K. Simmons, by leading the band in a mesmerizing performance of the jazz standard Caravan. This is despite Fletcher's attempts to publicly embarrass him by having the band first play a song that Andrew doesn't know. However, even beyond the debates about whether Andrew pushed himself too far in the pursuit of greatness, didn't Fletcher ultimately get what he really wanted? His own Charlie Parker. A few scenes earlier, Fletcher laments to Andrew that despite his efforts, he was never able to mold his own Charlie Parker, a genuine musical prodigy formed by his harsh, if we're being kind, methods. But with Andrew's stunning final performance, Fletcher finally got it. Andrew may think he was the real winner by subverting Fletcher's plan to embarrass him on stage, but all it did was push Andrew to give the best rendition of his life and fulfill Fletcher's own twisted ambition. Richmond Valentine, Kingsman: The Secret Service. Now, to be completely fair, Kingsman's villain Richmond Valentine, Samuel L. Jackson, absolutely did not want to die at the end. But all the same, he was ultimately far more successful in pulling off his population curbing plan than the movie's ending or its sequel would have you believe. Valentine's hilariously over-the-top scheme involved giving away free SIM cards to everyone on Earth before transmitting a signal which would turn them murderously violent, all in the pursuit of whittling down the population and stemming global warming. We see a brief display of this potential when Valentine activates a signal in the third act, causing absolute chaos around the world until the signal is stopped. People instantly start fighting and killing each other, with even parents, including Eggsy's own mother, trying to kill their own kids. And yet, director Matthew Vaughn kind of glosses over the fallout at the end of the film, no matter that surely millions, even tens of hundreds of millions of people would have been killed globally, especially the young, old, and vulnerable. Even with the signal only being active for such a short time, Valentine likely wiped out a decent portion of the world's population. Ozymandias, Watchmen. Plenty of spirited debate, shall we say, about whether Ozymandias is Watchmen's true villain or not, but you know, the guy kinda sorta murders 15 million people in his quest to unite the world against a common enemy, Dr. Manhattan. And that's not exactly heroic. There's absolutely a cruel, perverse logic to his actions, which are at least initially shown to completely succeed. The world does unite together, Manhattan is exiled from Earth, and the single dissenting hero, Rorschach, is even killed by Manhattan on his way out of the door. Some will point to the film's final scene, where Rorschach's journal ends up in the hands of a New York tabloid, as proof that Ozymandias' ruse will eventually be exposed. But think about it, who's gonna believe it? The scrawlings of a deranged vigilante have considerably less credibility than a retired superhero turned businessman, especially when published by a cranky paranoid tabloid. As such, it's incredibly likely that humanity at large would posthumously dismiss Rorschach as a fringe lunatic conspiracy theorist, and Ozymandias wouldn't face any major repercussions for his actions. He won in pretty much every way that matters. Khan Noonien Singh, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Ricardo Montalban's iconic villain Khan Noonien Singh may not survive the events of the greatest Star Trek movie, Wrath of Khan, but he nevertheless fulfills his primary objective: to, in his own words, do something far worse than kill Captain Kirk. Hurt him, and hurt him bad. Khan's actions end up severely damaging the Enterprise, in turn causing Spock's sacrificial death, and in Kirk's quest to resurrect Spock in the third film, also leads to the death of Kirk's son, David. On top of that, the precious Genesis device is destroyed, a ton of Starfleet personnel are dead, and because Kirk kills Klingon Krueger, Christopher Lloyd, in the third movie's climax, Klingons now hate him forevermore. And I mean, relatable, I'd also kind of hate you if you killed Klingon Christopher Lloyd. Sorry, Bill Shatner. And yeah, that's a big old mess that Khan created for Kirk, and consequently a lot of pain even long after Khan himself is dead. Khan cuts Kirk, and he cuts him deep. No matter that he didn't actually kill the guy, instead he left him to live and experience the full feeling of his pain.
William Ginter Riva, Spider-Man Far From Home. Though Spider-Man Far From Home ends with Spidey, Tom Holland, defeating Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, the movie elects not to mop up the army of disgruntled former Stark Industries employees who are helping Beck behind the scenes. And chief among them is Peter Billingsley's William Ginter Riva, who first appeared in the original Iron Man and returns here to aid Mysterio in his vengeful superheroic masquerade. What an obscenely deep, weird pull this was. After Mysterio dies, we catch one final glimpse of Riva as he backs up a copy of Mysterio's drone software and prepares to leak Spider-Man's identity to J. Jonah Jameson. And that's the last we've seen of him to date. Before Riva disappeared into the ether, he created a massive problem for Peter Parker by exposing his identity. And though Parker eventually managed to resolve this by the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, having everyone forget who he was certainly a less than ideal solution. Unlike Beck, Riva not only survived, but likely also maintained his anonymity, and so was basically able to slink off into the night undetected, free to do whatever the hell he wants. The little sicko. The Underminer, Incredibles 2. The first Incredibles movie ended with supervillain the Underminer showing up to wreak havoc throughout Metroville, at which point the titular superheroes step in to stop him. We didn't get to see the outcome of this battle until Incredibles 2 released a staggering 14 years later, unless, like me, you played the Incredibles Rise of the Underminer game most of the days. And though the Incredibles managed to stop the Underminer from destroying City Hall in the sequel, they don't actually prevent him from escaping, with a ton of money no less. The heroes disable the villain's gigantic drill tank thing, but he nevertheless flees with all the money he siphoned from Metroville Bank. And by the end, he's never caught. More to the point, while the Underminer didn't destroy Metroville, he did cause a ton of damage. Enough that the government shuts down the superhero relocation program, leaving the Parr family without a financial leg to stand on. So, to recap, the Underminer messed up the city, ruined the Incredibles' reputation temporarily, stole a ton of money, and got away scot-free. If that ain't winning on the balance of circumstances, then what is? Irma Bunt on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Though the James Bond franchise has been incredibly meticulous about leaving few villainous threads tied off, there is one glaring, decades-old exception, and it comes in potentially the greatest Bond movie ever made, Peter Hunt's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The primary villain of George Lazenby's solo Bond outing may be the iconic Telly Savalas as Blofeld, who was eventually dropped down a chimney and for your eyes only, and god, that movie is weird. But anyway, his loyal henchwoman, Irma Bunt, is really vicious in this one. Bunt is notable for committing arguably the single most heinous transgression against Bond in any of the movies, gunning down his new bride Tracy, the iconic Diana Rigg, at the very end of the movie. This understandably traumatizes 007 and carries through a thread that sees him seek vengeance against Blofeld. Yet Irma? She's never actually heard from again. There is, unfortunately, a tragic reason for this, as Bunt actress Ilsa Steppat passed away mere days after the film's premiere. The filmmakers had originally intended for Bunt to reappear in sequel Diamonds Are Forever, and likely receive her comeuppance, but ultimately decided to leave the character be rather than recast her. A seismic error, in my view, which set the Bond series on a 10-year path of decline before Timothy Dalton came back to rescue things in The Living Daylights. Side note as well, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, The Living Daylights, and License to Kill make for a pretty awesome trilogy of Bond stories, with Dalton's portrayal very much being rooted in the formermost film. But I'm getting distracted. From the evidence that we have in the films, Bunt completed her ruthless mission, was never punished for her actions, and even outlasted Blofeld himself, avoiding the whole weird chimney thing, which I hate that I'm having to make you look at this right now, it's so bad. The only quantum of solace that fans have is that Bunt was implied to have been killed by 007 in Ian Fleming's sequel novel to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, You Only Live Twice, even if this was never played out on screen. Either way, make sure you watch the movie because it goes extremely hard. And let me know too what your favorite Bond movie is down in the comments. Britt Stevenson, Saw 5. Though the Saw franchise's ultimate villains are, of course, Tobin Bell's Jigsaw and company, that's not to say the people they put through hell are all necessarily good and virtuous either. Quite the opposite in the case of Saw 5, which centers around 5 victims who all played a role in causing an apartment building fire that killed 8 people. The ringleader of the group is Britt, played by Julie Benz, an industrious and ambitious businesswoman who hired a drug addict called Malik, played by Greg Brick, to burn the aforementioned building down in order to get her hands on the property. Despite this, both Britt and Malik actually end up surviving Jigsaw's traps, albeit at the expense of half the blood in their bodies, but you know, you can always get more of that. While the 7th movie, Saw 3D, shows Malik to be repentant of his past behavior and even joining a Jigsaw survivor self-help group, Britt is never heard from again. Saw 5 implies that she survives, but her lack of presence at the self-help group suggests she's not exactly suffocating with guilt. Then again, given that Britt straight up admits to Malik that she knew there were people inside the building when she ordered it raised, that shouldn't be terribly surprising. The Killer, 12 Angry Men. In many respects, the duty of Sidney Lumet's 12 Angry Men is that it's not really concerned with who committed the central murder, but simply whether the jury can agree that the victim's son committed the act beyond a reasonable doubt. Yet the film's ending, where juror number 8, played by the iconic Henry Fonda, finally persuades the entire jury to return a not guilty verdict has a pretty bleak implication for the murder investigation itself. If you accept that the boy didn't commit the murder, then the killer is still out there, escaping justice. Either way, rather than ending the movie with a tidy final scene where the killer is categorically caught, which would have sucked FYI, the person who killed the man, wherever they are, isn't brought to justice. It's easy to gloss over this given that the film is generally focusing its energies elsewhere and basically implies a triumphant ending, no matter that someone who committed murder is walking around scot-free. Mayor Wade, Eight-Legged Freaks. The primary antagonists of Eight-Legged Freaks may be horse-sized mutant spiders, but there's also a cart-carrying human villain in the mix, Mayor Wade, played by Leon Rippey. Rippey is the man responsible for toxic waste being dumped in the town of Prosperity in the first place and causing the whole catastrophe, while showing little respect for the citizens his actions have endangered. When the proverbial spider goop hits the fan, Mayor Rippey flees to the local mines and locks the doors behind him, preventing any of the town's other citizens from joining him in safety. With blood on his hands, it certainly seems like Rippey will meet a horrifying end at the hand of an oversized tarantula. But alas, it never happens. Instead, the worst fate he suffers is having his beloved mall blown up in order to kill all the spiders. And while this capital blow might seem like firm punishment for Rippey and a categorical big L, he briefly mentions that he's going to file an insurance claim. And big business being the chummy enterprise it is in modern America, he almost certainly recouped all his expenses. More to the point, even if Rippey's mayoral ambitions likely went up in smoke in Prosperity, there was absolutely nothing stopping him from quietly slinging away and setting up shop in another rust bucket town. Maleficent in Maleficent. Even accepting that Maleficent reconfigures the iconic villainess into a more sympathetic, fleshed-out character played by Angelina Jolie, her initial vengeful plan still plays out far more successfully than the film's sunnier ending really makes clear. Maleficent has an understandably major bone to pick with her former lover Stefan, who cuts off her wings and stages her death in an attempt to appease the current king, in turn setting himself up to become his successor. When Stefan's daughter Aurora is born, an embittered Maleficent curses the child that on her 16th birthday she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and go to sleep forever, save for true love's kiss, breaking the curse. Stefan and his wife Layla go to drastic measures to try and prevent Aurora's destiny from befalling her, sequestering her in a remote cottage until the day after her 16th birthday and having every spinning wheel in the kingdom destroyed. Which would have wreaked havoc on the kingdom's, textiles industry, but, I get it. In the ensuing years, Stefan becomes obsessed with killing Maleficent and loses his mind, enough that he even refuses to see his wife on her deathbed. And even after Aurora falls into a slumber and is awakened by Maleficent's kiss on the forehead, Stefan doesn't get any time to savor his daughter's revival, his mad desire for revenge causing him to fall to his death while battling Maleficent. To summarize, Maleficent absolutely succeeded in her plan to emotionally brutalize Stefan, effectively separating him from his daughter for her entire childhood, and even once the curse lifts, he's not around to enjoy it, being dead and all. While Maleficent was certainly in a better, less twisted place by film's end, her initial plot to devastate her former lover absolutely worked as intended, even if the film keenly downplays it somewhat. The Muggers, Death Wish. The original Death Wish sees architect Paul Kersey, played by Charles Bronson, driven to vigilantism following the murder of his wife and brutal assault of his daughter during a home invasion. As soon as they've done their stuff, the three anonymous muggers, one of whom is played by Jeff Goldblum, leave the apartment and, at the same time, the movie as a whole. Yeah, even though this act is what prompts Kersey to pick up a gun and start cleaning up New York City of his own accord, the original three assailants never actually get their comeuppance. Despite Kersey killing numerous violent criminals throughout the rest of the film, the precise men who ruined his life are never seen again, and the audience is left to assume that they simply got away with it. Though the increasingly bloodthirsty glut of sequels ensured that no bad man escaped Kersey's grasp, the somewhat more quote-unquote grounded original had them simply disappear into the night, free to continue their heinous home invasions elsewhere. Because, let's be honest, in a city as big as New York, even a fired-up Charles Bronson can't catch everyone. The Joker, The Dark Knight. The Joker's rampage in The Dark Knight is seemingly concluded when he's captured by Batman and, we can assume, taken to Arkham Asylum. Yet the Joker's wild acts throughout the film end up having far-reaching consequences for Gotham City, namely his success in corrupting District Attorney Harvey Dent, played by Aaron Eckhart. The Clown Prince of Crime not only facilitated Dent's downfall, but he also killed Rachel Dawes, forced Batman to kill Dent, and consequently compelled him to take the blame for Dent's rampage, in turn going into hiding. Beyond this, 8 years later in The Dark Knight Rises, Bane finally exposes the truth of Dent's actions, in turn throwing Gotham's justice system into chaos, just as the Joker initially intended. And finally, we see Bane release the prisoners from Blackgate Penitentiary and, presumably, Arkham Asylum, which one assumes would most certainly include the Joker himself, who, for obvious reasons, did not appear in the sequel. On the balance of victimization and overall planned success, the Clown Prince absolutely triumphed over this incarnation of Batman, and there's a fair assumption he's still out there somewhere too.